My name is Lila Monroe. I'm 32 years old. 3 weeks ago, my mother died during what was supposed to be a routine surgery at St. Vincent Medical Center in Asheville, North Carolina. She updated her will 2 days before the procedure. She left the house to my older sister, the SUV to my younger brother, her savings to her church, and to me, a sealed envelope with one sentence inside. The attorney read it out loud. My siblings went quiet in a way I had never seen before. My mother never expected me to open it in front of everyone, but I did. And that single sentence didn't break me the way she intended. It changed everything. Before I take you back to how it all started, if you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to Women Reddit Stories and drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. I always read them, and I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now let me take you back to the morning everything shifted. The call came at 8:47 a.m. on a Monday. I was at my desk at Blue Ridge Financial Services, halfway through reviewing a quarterly report, when my phone buzzed across the surface of my desk. The name on the screen read Daniel Whitaker, attorney at law. I let it ring once, twice, then picked up on the third. Lila, this is Daniel Whitaker. His voice was calm, practiced, the kind of tone people use when they've delivered difficult news more times than they can count. I'm calling about your mother. I leaned back in my chair, my pen still in my hand, my eyes fixed on the spreadsheet open in front of me even though I wasn't seeing it anymore. She passed this morning. There were complications during surgery. The office didn't stop. Keyboards clicked. Phones rang. Someone laughed 2 cubicles over. Everything continued like nothing had changed. I see, I said. There was a pause on the other end, just long enough to acknowledge that my response wasn't what most people would give. I'm sorry, Lila, he added. Thank you for letting me know. Another pause, then his tone shifted slightly, something more deliberate threading through it. There's something else. Your mother updated her will 2 days before the procedure. There are some unusual elements. I would strongly recommend that you attend the reading. Unusual. The word settled in my chest in a way I couldn't ignore. When? I asked. This Thursday. 10:30 a.m. My office. I wrote it down on a sticky note without thinking. Date. Time. Location. Like it was just another appointment. It wasn't. The last time I spoke to my mother was 5 months ago. She had called to remind me that Hannah's engagement party was formal attire and that I shouldn't come if I was going to dress like I didn't belong. I told her I wasn't coming at all. She said, "Good. That makes things simpler." That was it. 5 months of silence, and then a lawyer calling me on a Monday morning to tell me she was gone. I didn't leave work early. I didn't cry. I finished the report, emailed it to my supervisor, and packed up at 5 like I always did. Grief had never been sudden for me when it came to my mother. It had been something quieter, something that settled in years ago and stayed there. Growing up in the Monroe house felt like living in a place where everyone had assigned seats, and mine was always just slightly outside the circle. Hannah, my older sister, had my mother's blonde hair and bright blue eyes. Caleb, my younger brother, had my father's broad shoulders and easy smile. And then there was me. Dark hair, darker eyes, features that didn't quite match either side of the family. My mother noticed. She made sure everyone else noticed too. Hannah has my eyes, she would say during church gatherings, smiling as if she were presenting something she'd created herself. Caleb looks just like his father. Then her gaze would land on me, always with that slight pause. And Lila, she'd say, her tone light but edged with something else, well, she's unique. People would laugh politely. I would look down at whatever was in front of me and pretend it didn't matter. Family photos told the same story. Hannah in the center, always. Caleb beside her. My mother just behind them, hands resting on their shoulders like a frame within the frame. And me somewhere near the edge, half in, half out, sometimes cropped entirely. We ran out of space, my mother would say if anyone ever asked. My father, or the man I believed was my father, never corrected her. He wasn't cruel. He was quiet. He'd leave a $20 bill on my dresser for my birthday and ask about my grades over breakfast, but he never once told my mother to stop. He just existed around it, like it was weather he couldn't change. He passed away when I was 24. Heart attack. Sudden. At his funeral, I stood near the back. My mother leaned toward a woman from church while the service was still going on. I caught a fragment of what she said. At least he never knew. I didn't understand it then. I didn't ask. I just filed it away somewhere in the back of my mind, the way you do with things that don't make sense but feel important. Hannah was 36 now, married to a real estate developer named Mark Ellison, living in a house my mother had helped them buy in a neighborhood just outside Charlotte. Down payment, my mother. Renovations, my mother. The luxury SUV in the driveway, my mother again. She liked to call herself independent. Caleb was 29 and had never held a job longer than 8 months. He drifted between gigs, bartending, delivery driving, working for a landscaping company that let him go before the season ended. Through all of it, my mother covered his rent. 3 years straight. I paid my own way through the University of North Carolina at Asheville with scholarships and a part-time job at a bookstore downtown. No one co-signed anything. No one offered help. When I graduated, the only person who came was my roommate's aunt. My mother said the drive was too long. It was 40 minutes. So when Hannah and Caleb referred to me as the accountant, always with that slight tone like it was something small, something unremarkable, I let it pass. I had my own apartment, my own job, my own life. They had my mother. 2 days before the surgery, Hannah called me. "Mom's going in for her procedure," she said. "You don't need to come." "She didn't ask for you." "I wasn't planning to," I replied. "Good," she said, like we had agreed on something important. The surgery happened. My mother went in. She didn't come out. That same evening, Hannah posted a photo on Facebook. A picture of the family in the hospital waiting room, her, Caleb, Mark, my Aunt Denise, and their pastor. They were all standing close together, arms around each other, faces serious but composed. The caption read, "Surrounded by the people she loved most." I stared at that photo longer than I should have. I wasn't in it. I was never in the photos. And now, I never would be. 2 days later, Daniel Whitaker called again. This time, there was something different in his voice. Not urgency exactly, but something close. "I want to confirm you'll be attending on Thursday," he said. "I will," I replied. "I strongly recommend it." There it was again. Strongly recommend it. Lawyers don't say things like that without a reason. That night, I sat at my kitchen counter, the sticky note in front of me. My apartment was small but mine. Every piece of furniture had been chosen by me, paid for by me. There were no family photos on the walls. Going to that reading meant stepping back into a space I had spent years quietly removing myself from. But if I didn't go, Hannah would control everything. The narrative. The distribution. The story of what my mother left behind. And I would disappear again. This time, not just from photos, but from something official. The next morning at work, my coworker Megan noticed the note on my desk. "You okay?" she asked, leaning against the edge of my cubicle. "My mother left me something," I said. "I don't know what, but I have a right to be there." Megan studied my face for a moment. "After everything you've told me about her, you're still going?" I picked up the sticky note and pressed it into my planner. "Not for her," I said. "For me." Thursday came faster than I expected. I wore a black blouse, simple slacks, and the only pair of heels I owned. I drove to Daniel Whitaker's office just off Main Street, my hand steady on the wheel even though my stomach wasn't. There were already cars in the lot when I pulled in. I was the last to arrive. And somehow, I already knew, that room wasn't waiting for me. The office sat above a law firm on a quiet stretch of Main Street, the kind of building that looked like it hadn't changed in decades. Brick exterior, narrow windows, a single staircase leading up to a second floor that smelled faintly of paper and polish. I paused at the bottom of the stairs for just a second, not because I was unsure, but because I wanted to step into that room on my terms. Then I went up. The conference room door was already open. Everyone was inside. Hannah sat at the far end of the table, legs crossed, posture perfect, dressed in black like she had coordinated it down to the last detail. Mark was beside her, scrolling through his phone with the kind of detached focus people use when they don't want to engage. Caleb sat halfway down the table, slouched back, one arm draped over the chair, looking bored more than anything else. My Aunt Denise sat near the wall, hands folded tightly in her lap, her purse resting against her knees. And at the head of the table was Daniel Whitaker, silver hair, wire-rimmed glasses, a folder neatly arranged in front of him. And next to that folder, a single sealed envelope. My name was written on it. Layla. In my mother's handwriting. I stepped into the room. The shift in attention was immediate, like a light had been turned in my direction whether anyone wanted it there or not. Hannah looked up first. "Oh," she said, her voice light but edged. "You came." Caleb let out a short laugh under his breath. "Didn't think you would." I didn't respond. I walked to the empty chair closest to the door, the one that hadn't been claimed, the one that felt like it had been left for me by default rather than intention, and sat down. Daniel gave me a small nod. "Thank you for coming, Lila." Aunt Denise reached across the table and briefly touched my hand. Her fingers were cold. "I'm glad you're here," she said quietly. There was something in her tone, something heavier than simple politeness, but before I could ask anything, Daniel cleared his throat. "Shall we begin?" The room settled. He opened the folder in front of him, adjusted his glasses, and began reading in that steady, practiced voice. "I, Eleanor Grace Monroe, of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament." The words flowed in a rhythm that felt almost detached from what they meant, like they belonged more to the structure of law than to the reality of a life. Hannah leaned back slightly in her chair, her chin lifted just enough to suggest she already knew what was coming. "To my eldest daughter, Hannah Monroe Ellison, I leave the property located at 118 Willow Creek Drive, including all furnishings and fixtures therein." Hannah didn't react immediately, but I saw the corner of her mouth lift, just slightly. Mark placed his hand on her knee, a silent acknowledgement. Of course she got the house. "To my son, Caleb James Monroe, I leave my 2020 Lexus RX and all personal items contained within the garage at the aforementioned property." Caleb straightened a little, a grin spreading across his face. "Seriously?" "The Lexus too," he said, not bothering to hide his satisfaction. Daniel didn't look up. "To Grace Fellowship Church, I leave the entirety of my savings account, currently valued at approximately $52,000, to be used at the discretion of the church leadership." Aunt Denise shifted slightly. From the corner of my eye, I saw her press her lips together. Then Daniel paused. He removed his glasses, cleaned them slowly with a cloth, and placed them back on. When he looked up again, his gaze settled directly on me. "And to my daughter, Lila Monroe." The room felt different suddenly. Not louder, not quieter, just tighter. Daniel reached for the envelope on the table. The same one I had noticed the moment I walked in. He picked it up carefully, almost deliberately, and extended it toward me. "This envelope, to be opened at the reading." The words hung in the air. Hannah let out a soft breath, almost like a laugh. "Well," she said, tilting her head slightly, "that's fitting." Caleb leaned back again, shaking his head with a smirk. Mom always did have a flair for drama. I took the envelope from Daniel's hand. It weighed almost nothing. Everything my mother had owned, divided, assigned, distributed, and my share fit in the palm of my hand. The paper was slightly textured, cream-colored, sealed along the flap. My name was written in blue ink, the letters pressed hard enough into the paper that I could feel the indentation beneath my fingertips. She hadn't written it casually. She had written it with intention. "Go ahead," Hannah said, her voice smooth. "Open it. We're all here." There was something in her tone, something just beneath the surface, like she already knew or thought she did. Caleb chuckled. "Yeah, don't keep us in suspense. Maybe it's a heartfelt apology." He didn't mean it. None of them did. Daniel folded his hands on the table. "Lila," he said, measured, "you are not required to open it here. You may take it with you and read it privately if you prefer." Hannah's eyes flicked toward him immediately. "But the will says at the reading," she said. "It does," Daniel replied evenly. "However, Lila has the discretion to decide how she proceeds." I looked down at the envelope in my hands. For a moment, the room faded just slightly, not disappearing, but becoming less important than the object I was holding. This was it. Whatever my mother had decided to leave me, whatever final message she had chosen, was inside this envelope. A final word. A final act. "I'll open it," I said. The decision came out steady, even though I hadn't fully thought it through until the words were already spoken. Hannah leaned forward just a fraction, her attention sharpening. Caleb straightened in his chair. Aunt Denise's grip tightened on her purse. I slid my finger under the flap and tore it open. The sound was louder than it should have been. Inside, there was a single sheet of paper, folded once. I pulled it out and unfolded it carefully. One sentence. Handwritten. Same blue ink. Same pressure. Same deliberate strokes. My eyes moved across the words. Then back to the beginning. Then across them again. I felt something shift inside me, not sudden, not explosive, but deep and quiet, like something long buried had finally moved. My face didn't change. I made sure of that. The room was waiting. I looked up at Daniel. "Please read it," I said, handing him the paper. He hesitated for just a moment before taking it. He adjusted his glasses, glanced down, and began to read silently first. I watched his expression. Watched the exact moment it changed. The color drained from his face, just slightly. He placed the paper flat on the table, his fingers pressing lightly against it as if grounding himself. Then he looked at me. I nodded. "Read it out loud." The room held its breath without realizing it. Daniel inhaled once, steadying himself, and began. "Layla is not Thomas Monroe's biological daughter. Her father is." He stopped. Just for a fraction of a second. Then continued. "William Carter." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full. Heavy. Stretching. Hannah blinked, her expression freezing in place before it could fully form. Caleb sat up so quickly his chair scraped against the floor. "What?" he said, the word coming out sharper than anything he had said before. Aunt Denise closed her eyes. Not in shock. In recognition. And me? I sat there, my hands resting on the table, my spine straight, my heartbeat steady in a way that didn't match the moment at all. Because suddenly, everything made sense. Every look. Every comment. Every silence. So that was it. That was the reason. That's why, I said quietly, more to myself than anyone else. That's why I never fit. Daniel placed the paper back inside the envelope, but the words didn't go back with it. They were already in the room now. In the air. In every face turned toward me. Hannah was the first to recover. She always was. This changes everything, she said, her voice tight, controlled. She's not even. Legally, Daniel interrupted calmly, the will stands as written. Hannah turned toward him, her eyes sharp. She's not Monroe. Layla is named in the will, Daniel replied. She has received what your mother designated for her. The distribution is complete. Caleb let out a disbelieving laugh, running a hand through his hair. She gets a letter, he said. That's what you're calling a distribution? I didn't look at him. I didn't look at Hannah either. I picked up the envelope from the table and held it for a moment, feeling the weight of something that had already begun to change everything. You got the house, I said, my voice even. I glanced at Caleb. You got the car. Then I looked back at the envelope in my hand. I got the truth. And for the first time since I walked into that room, I realized something I hadn't expected. The truth didn't feel like a loss. It felt like the beginning of something I didn't fully understand yet. But whatever it wasn't small. No one moved right away. The room stayed suspended in that moment, like everything had shifted but hadn't quite settled into its new shape yet. I could feel it in the way people breathed, in the way no one quite knew where to look. Hannah was the first to stand. She pushed her chair back slowly, controlled, like she was choosing every movement carefully so nothing would crack through the surface. This is ridiculous, she said, her voice low but sharp. Mom wrote that 2 days before surgery. She was under stress, probably medicated. This isn't reliable. Daniel didn't react. He simply folded his hands on the table again. Your mother was of sound mind when she updated the will, he said. I witnessed it personally. The document is valid, and the statement within the envelope has now been entered into record. Caleb was pacing now, running a hand through his hair again and again like he was trying to wake himself up from something. No, he said. That's not possible. Dad, he stopped, swallowed, then corrected himself, Thomas was my dad. He was her dad too. No one answered him. Because no one could. Aunt Denise finally opened her eyes. She didn't look surprised. She didn't look confused. She looked tired. Like this was something she had been carrying for a long time. I wondered when she'd tell you, she said quietly. Hannah turned to her immediately. You knew? Her voice rose, the control slipping for the first time. You knew about this? Denise didn't flinch. I didn't know everything, she said. But I knew enough. Hannah let out a sharp breath, turning away, her hand pressing against her forehead. This is unbelievable, she muttered. I sat there, still, letting the noise move around me without stepping into it. Because inside, something had already gone quiet. Not empty. Clear. 32 years. 32 years of feeling like something didn't line up, like I was slightly out of place in a way I could never explain. And now, in a single sentence, it had all been explained. Not erased. Explained. That's why he said it, I murmured. Daniel glanced at me. Said what? I looked up, meeting his eyes. At least he never knew. The words felt different now. Heavier. Sharper. Aunt Denise inhaled slowly. She told me that too, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. At the funeral. Hannah looked between us, her expression tightening. Stop talking like this is real, she snapped. It's a line in a letter. That's all it is. It's a confession, I said. The room stilled again. Hannah's eyes locked onto mine. No, she said. It's not. And even if it were, she gestured vaguely toward me, frustration spilling over now, even if it were, what does that change? You're still, you. The way she stopped herself before finishing the sentence said more than if she had said it out loud. Caleb let out a short, uneasy laugh. Yeah, he added, though there was less confidence behind it now. It's not like it gives you anything. I almost smiled. Not because it was funny. Because for the first time, I realized something they hadn't yet. I don't think she meant for it to give me anything, I said. Hannah crossed her arms. Exactly. I tilted my head slightly. I think she meant it to take something away. That landed. You could feel it. Because that made sense. That fit the pattern. That was my mother. Daniel shifted slightly in his chair, then spoke, his tone more deliberate now. There is one additional detail that may be relevant, he said. All eyes turned to him. He hesitated for just a fraction of a second, like he was deciding whether or not to continue. Then he did. William Carter, he said, was a federal judge in this district for over 20 years. The air changed. Not dramatically. But enough. Hannah's expression shifted first, not to shock, but to something sharper, more focused. Recognition. Caleb stopped pacing. Wait, he said slowly. Carter, like Judge Carter? Daniel nodded once. The same. I felt it then. Not the full weight of it. But the outline. The shape of something bigger than the sentence itself. Hannah's arms dropped from where they had been crossed. She glanced at Mark, who had finally put his phone down, his attention fully on the conversation now. Why does that matter? She asked, but there was a tightness in her voice that hadn't been there before. Daniel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at me. There may be implications beyond what was written in the envelope, he said carefully. Caleb frowned. What kind of implications? Daniel exhaled slowly. Judge Carter passed away 3 years ago, he said. Before his death, he established a trust. The room went still again. A different kind of stillness this time. More focused. More dangerous. A trust? Hannah repeated. Daniel nodded. It included a provision, he continued, for a biological child he believed existed but was never able to identify or locate. The words settled like pieces clicking into place. I didn't move. I didn't speak. But something inside me shifted again, deeper this time. How do you know that? Hannah asked, her voice sharp again, but now there was something else underneath it. Something close to urgency. His estate attorney contacted me shortly after Judge Carter's passing, Daniel said. He was attempting to locate any information that might confirm the existence of that child. At the time, I had nothing to offer. And now? Caleb asked. Daniel looked at me again. Now I do. Silence stretched. Hannah was staring at me, but not the way she had before. Not with dismissal. Not with irritation. With calculation. Mark leaned in toward her, whispering something under his breath. She shook her head slightly, not taking her eyes off me. That doesn't mean anything, she said quickly. A trust is just money. It doesn't mean she can just, walk in and claim it. Daniel didn't respond to her. He kept his focus on me. If the information in that letter is accurate, he said, and if it can be confirmed, then yes, it could mean exactly that. Caleb let out a low whistle, the sound cutting through the tension. You're serious, he said. Like, actually serious? Daniel's expression didn't change. I don't deal in hypotheticals lightly. I reached for the envelope again, picking it up from the table. It felt different now. Not heavier. But not empty anymore either. Hannah shook her head, pacing now the way Caleb had been earlier. This is insane, she said. You're talking about basing all of this on a sentence in a letter written by a woman who, she stopped herself, pressing her lips together. A woman who what? I asked quietly. She didn't answer. Because she couldn't say it without unraveling her own argument. I stood. The movement felt natural, not dramatic, just finished. You got what she left you, I said, looking at Hannah. The house. Then I looked at Caleb. The car. I slipped the envelope into my bag. I got what she tried to use against me. Hannah's eyes narrowed. And what's that supposed to mean? I met her gaze. It means, I said, we don't know yet what she actually gave me. I turned toward the door. No one stopped me. No one followed. But I could feel it behind me as I walked out, the shift in the room, the recalculation, the moment where everything they thought was settled, wasn't anymore. By the time I reached the bottom of the stairs, my phone was already vibrating in my hand. I didn't need to look at the screen to know it was Hannah. I let it ring. Then stop. Then start again. Outside, the air felt different. Or maybe I did. I stood there for a moment, the envelope in my bag, the sentence replaying in my mind, not as a wound, not as something sharp, but as something opening. My mother had written it to close a door. She just hadn't realized. It might open a different one. I didn't answer Hannah's call. Or the second one. By the third, I silenced my phone and slipped it into my bag, letting the vibration fade against the lining as I stood in the parking lot outside Daniel Whitaker's office. The morning sun was brighter than it had any right to be, like the world hadn't gotten the message that something had just shifted underneath it. I got into my car and sat there for a moment without starting the engine. William Carter. The name felt unfamiliar in a way that didn't match what I had just learned. It should have meant something. It should have connected to a memory, a face, a voice. But there was nothing. Just a name. A name that had been sitting 32 years away from me. I started the car and drove home. The drive took 15 minutes. I remember every turn, every stoplight, every stretch of road, but not because I was paying attention. It was the opposite. My mind kept circling back to the same place, the same sentence, like it was trying to understand how something so small could rearrange everything. By the time I pulled into my apartment complex, my phone had stopped ringing. But it didn't stay quiet for long. As soon as I stepped inside, it buzzed again. This time, it was Caleb. I stared at the screen for a few seconds before answering. Yeah? I said. What the hell was that? He asked immediately. No greeting. No hesitation. Which part? I replied, setting my bag down on the kitchen counter. Don't do that, he snapped. You know what I mean. That letter. That whole, he exhaled sharply. That whole thing. I leaned back against the counter, crossing one arm over the other. It was exactly what it sounded like, I said. No, it wasn't, he said quickly. Mom wouldn't she wouldn't lie about something like that. I didn't respond right away. Because that was the problem, wasn't it? She wouldn't lie. Not like that. She didn't lie, I said finally. There was a pause on the other end. Then Caleb's voice came back, lower now. So what, you just believe it? I don't have to believe it, I said. It explains everything. Another pause. Longer this time. I mean, even if it's true, he said slowly, like he was working through the logic in real time, it doesn't really change anything. Right? I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was predictable. That depends on what you think anything is, I said. Come on, Lila, he said, frustration creeping back in. Don't make this into something it's not. I'm not making it into anything, I replied. I'm just not pretending it's nothing. He didn't like that. I could hear it in the silence. You're not seriously thinking about that trust thing, are you? He asked. There it was. Not confusion. Not concern. Money. I'm thinking about finding out the truth, I said. Yeah, but, he hesitated, then pushed forward, if there is money involved, that's not yours. You didn't even know the guy. I let that sit for a second. Then I said, and I knew Mom? He didn't answer. Because he couldn't. Look, he said after a moment, his tone shifting, softer now. I'm just saying, don't go chasing something that's going to blow everything up. I pushed myself off the counter and walked to the window, looking out over the parking lot. Everything's already blown up, I said. And I hung up. I didn't wait for a response. I didn't need one. The apartment was quiet again. It was the same quiet I had lived in for years, but it felt different now. Not heavier. Not lighter. Just changed. I walked back to the counter and pulled the envelope out of my bag. It was already open, but I slid the paper out again anyway, unfolding it carefully. The handwriting looked the same as it had in that room. Steady. Deliberate. Certain. Layla is not Thomas Monroe's biological daughter. Her father is William Carter. No explanation. No apology. Just a statement. A fact. Or at least, something she wanted me to believe was a fact. I read it again. And again. Not because I didn't understand it, but because I was trying to feel something about it. Anger. Hurt. Anything. But what I felt instead was something else. Clarity. I folded the paper and set it down on the counter, then reached for my laptop. If this was true, if even a part of it was true, then there would be something. A record. A trace. A connection. I typed the name into the search bar. William Carter. The results came up immediately. Federal judge. Western District of North Carolina. Served for 23 years. Appointed in the late 90s. Retired 5 years before his death. There was a photo. I clicked on it. The image loaded slowly, sharpening piece by piece until it settled into focus. Gray hair. Strong jaw. Dark eyes. I leaned closer without realizing I was doing it. Because there was something there. Something familiar. Not obvious. Not immediate. But there. The eyes. The shape. The way they held a certain stillness that felt known. I sat back in my chair, my heart beating just a little faster now. This wasn't just a name anymore. This was a person. A real one. I scrolled. Obituaries. Articles. Mentions of his career, his reputation. Words like respected, disciplined, fair. There was mention of his family. A wife, Margaret Carter, deceased. A daughter, Emily Carter. No mention of anyone else. No mention of me. I stared at the screen, the words blurring slightly as my mind tried to line everything up. If he was my father, he didn't know. Or he knew and couldn't find me. Or he knew and didn't try. Each possibility felt different. None of them felt complete. I kept scrolling. Then I saw it. A short paragraph buried in an article about his retirement. Judge Carter expressed one personal regret, stating that there were things in his life he wished he had handled differently, particularly when it came to people he was unable to reconnect with in time. I stopped. Read it again. People he was unable to reconnect with. Plural. Not specific. But not nothing either. I closed the laptop slowly, pressing my palms flat against the table. My mother hadn't just written a sentence. She had dropped me into a story I didn't know I was part of. And somewhere in that story, there were answers. My phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Hannah. It wasn't Caleb. It was Daniel Whitaker. I picked up immediately. Layla, he said, I was expecting your call. I was about to make it, I replied. I've spoken with the Carter estate attorney, he continued. His name is Richard Lawson. He's been waiting for a development like this. That word again. Waiting. For how long? I asked. Since Judge Carter passed, he said. About 3 years. I felt something tighten in my chest. 3 years. 3 years of something sitting unresolved. He wants to meet with you, Daniel said. I didn't hesitate. When? Tomorrow afternoon, he replied. His office is in Charlotte. I looked down at the envelope on the counter. At the single sentence that had started all of this. Okay, I said. I'll be there. There was a brief pause. Lila, Daniel added, his tone quieter now, whatever your mother intended with that letter, this may not be what she expected. I let out a small breath. No, I said. I don't think it is. After the call ended, I stood there for a long moment, the apartment still around me, the world outside continuing like it always did. Then I reached for my keys. Because whatever came next, I wasn't going to sit still for it. The drive to Charlotte took just under 2 hours. I left earlier than I needed to, not because I was in a hurry, but because sitting still in my apartment felt harder than moving forward into something I didn't fully understand yet. The highway stretched out in long, steady lines, trees blurring past in early afternoon light, and for most of the drive, I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't want noise. I wanted to hear my own thoughts clearly. William Carter. The name felt different now than it had the day before. Less distant. Less abstract. Not familiar exactly, but no longer empty. A person. A life. A connection I hadn't known existed. By the time I reached Charlotte, the city had that usual weekday rhythm, traffic moving just a little slower than it should, people crossing streets with purpose, buildings reflecting the kind of life I had always watched from the outside without ever stepping into. Richard Lawson's office was in a professional building just off Tryon Street. Clean glass exterior, polished lobby, the kind of place that felt structured and deliberate. I parked, took a breath, and went inside. The receptionist directed me upstairs. The hallway was quiet, carpeted, lined with framed certificates and understated artwork. When I reached the office door, it was already slightly open. Layla Monroe? I turned. A man in his mid-60s stood just inside the doorway. Silver hair, neatly trimmed beard, glasses resting low on his nose. He didn't look surprised to see me. He looked prepared. Yes, I said. I'm Richard Lawson, he replied, stepping forward and offering his hand. Thank you for coming. His grip was firm but not overpowering, his tone calm in a way that immediately made the situation feel more real. Come in. The office was warm. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with legal volumes and files, but there was also something personal in the space, framed photos, small details that made it feel lived in. And on the wall behind his desk. There it was again. The photograph. William Carter. I stopped for just a second before sitting down, my eyes lingering on the frame longer than I meant them to. You see it too, Lawson said. I looked at him. What? The resemblance, he said gently. I didn't answer right away. Because I did. I saw it. Not perfectly. Not in a way that would make someone stop me on the street and point it out. But enough. Enough that once you noticed it, you couldn't unsee it. I wasn't sure at first, I admitted. He nodded, like that was the answer he expected. Most people wouldn't be, he said. Not without context. He moved behind his desk, sitting down and opening a folder that had clearly been prepared before I ever arrived. Judge Carter established a trust 3 years before his passing, he began. It included several provisions, but one in particular is the reason we're here. I leaned forward slightly, my attention narrowing. A provision for a biological child, he continued, one he believed existed but could not locate. There it was again. That phrase. Could not locate. Not didn't try. Not didn't care. Could not. He knew? I asked. Lawson nodded. He was aware of your existence, he said. Not your name. Not your location. But he knew there had been a child. Something shifted in my chest. Not sharp. Not painful. Just something. He tried to find you, Lawson added. I looked at him, searching his face for anything that might suggest hesitation or uncertainty. There was none. For how long? I asked. Off and on for several years, he said. More seriously in the last 5. 5 years. I thought about that. About where I had been 5 years ago. Working. Living. Existing in a life that felt self-contained. While somewhere not that far away, someone had been looking for me. He hired an investigator, Lawson continued. Followed every lead he could. But your mother, he paused slightly, choosing his words carefully, was very effective at keeping you out of reach. I let out a slow breath. That sounded right. That sounded exactly like her. He never stopped believing you were out there, Lawson said. That's why the provision exists. He turned the folder slightly so it faced me, revealing neatly organized documents. However, he added, before anything can move forward, there needs to be confirmation. I already knew what he meant. DNA, I said. Yes. The word didn't feel heavy. It felt necessary. We'll arrange the test through a certified lab, he said. We already have a genetic profile on file from Judge Carter's medical records. Once the comparison is complete, we'll have a definitive answer. I nodded once. Okay. There was no hesitation in it. Because whatever the result was, I needed to know. Lawson studied me for a moment, then leaned back slightly in his chair. There's something else you should be aware of, he said. I looked up. Judge Carter had a daughter, he said. Emily Carter. She still lives on the family property just outside the city. I felt something tighten slightly at that. A daughter. Someone who had known him. Someone who had been part of his life in a way I hadn't. She knows about you, Lawson added. I blinked. She does? He nodded. She's known about the possibility for years, he said. Your father told her. He didn't keep it from her. That mattered more than I expected it to. He spoke about you often, Lawson continued. Not in detail, he didn't have details, but enough that she understands. Understands. The word settled differently than everything else. Does she want to meet me? I asked. Lawson's expression softened slightly. Yes, he said. She does. I looked down at the documents on the desk, at the outline of something that felt like it had been waiting long before I ever knew it existed. Not today, he added. First, we confirm everything. Then, if you're comfortable, we can arrange that meeting. I nodded again. That makes sense. He closed the folder gently. I'll have my assistant coordinate the DNA test, he said. It usually takes about 10 days for results. 10 days. 10 days of waiting. 10 days of knowing something could change again. I stood, and he stood with me. Lila, he said, his tone more personal now, I know this is a lot. I met his eyes. It is, I said. But you're handling it remarkably well. I almost smiled. I've had practice, I replied. That seemed to land. He walked me to the door, pausing just before I stepped out. For what it's worth, he said, your father would have wanted you here. I didn't answer. Not because I didn't feel anything. But because I didn't know what to do with that feeling yet. I stepped into the hallway, then into the elevator, then back out into the city air. The world hadn't changed. Traffic still moved. People still walked. Everything looked exactly the same. But it wasn't. Because now there was a timeline. A process. An answer waiting at the end of it. And for the first time since I opened that envelope, I wasn't just reacting to what my mother had done. I was moving towards something she never intended me to find. The DNA test took 10 days. 10 days of waking up, getting dressed, going to work, answering emails, reviewing reports, sitting through meetings, and pretending that everything was still where it had always been. On the outside, nothing changed. My routine stayed intact. My coworkers didn't treat me differently. The numbers on my screen still needed to balance. But underneath all of it, something was shifting. Every day felt like it was leading somewhere. Not fast. Not dramatically. Just steadily. Megan noticed it first. "You're quieter," she said one afternoon, leaning against the edge of my desk the same way she always did when she wanted to talk without making it obvious. "I'm always quiet," I replied, not looking up from the spreadsheet in front of me. "Not like this," she said. "This is different." I paused, then saved the file and closed my laptop halfway. "I'm waiting on something," I said. She studied my face for a moment. "Good or bad?" she asked. "I don't know yet." She nodded slowly, like she understood that answer better than any explanation I could have given. "Well," she said, pushing off the desk, "whatever it is, I'm on your side." I watched her walk away, then looked back at my screen. On your side. It was a simple sentence. But it felt new. By the 7th day, Hannah had stopped calling. Not because she didn't care. Because she was waiting too. Watching. Calculating. Caleb texted twice during those 10 days. The first message was short. "You hear anything yet?" I didn't respond. The second came 3 days later. "Just, keep me in the loop." I didn't respond to that one either. Not out of anger. Out of clarity. Whatever came next. I needed it to be mine. On the 10th day, my phone rang at 2:16 in the afternoon. I was sitting in my car in the parking lot outside my office, engine off, a cup of coffee untouched in the cup holder. Richard Lawson. I stared at the screen for a second, then answered. "Layla," he said. His voice was steady. "Prepared. We have the results." I didn't speak right away. Not because I was afraid. Because I wanted to hear it clearly. Not through expectation. Not through assumption. Just as it was. "Go ahead," I said. There was a brief pause. Then. "The match is 99.97%, he said. "You are the biological daughter of William Carter." The words settled in slowly. Not like a shock. Not like something exploding. More like something locking into place. A piece that had always been missing, finally there. I leaned back in my seat, my hand tightening slightly around the phone. "Okay," I said. It was the only word that came out. But it was enough. Lawson continued, his tone shifting just slightly, more procedural now. "With that confirmation, the trust provision is officially activated." I closed my eyes for a moment. Activated. A door opening. "There are 3 primary components," he said. "First, a parcel of land, approximately 35 acres, just outside Charlotte, currently leased to a local agricultural company. It generates an annual income of roughly $26,000. I listened. Not reacting. Just absorbing. Second, an investment portfolio currently valued at approximately $310,000. My grip on the phone tightened slightly. And third, he added, lifetime residency access to a guest house located on the Carter family estate. I opened my eyes again, staring at the windshield in front of me, the outside world slightly blurred. Total estimated value, he said, is just under $600,000. $600,000. The number existed. But it didn't land the way I expected it to. Because this wasn't just money. It was proof. It was confirmation. It was something that had existed without me, now recognizing me. "Lila?" Lawson said. "I'm here," I replied. Emily would like to meet you, he said. She's been hoping for this outcome. I exhaled slowly. Of course she had. When? I asked. This Saturday, he said. At the estate. I looked down at my hands. They weren't shaking. They were steady. I'll be there, I said. After the call ended, I sat in the car for a long time. I didn't start the engine. I didn't check my phone. I just sat there, letting everything settle into place. My mother had left me a sentence. One sentence. 14 words. She had meant it as a final cut. A final separation. A way to make sure I understood I didn't belong. And instead, it had done the opposite. I picked up my phone and turned it over in my hand. There were 3 missed calls. All from Hannah. I hadn't heard them ring. A text followed seconds later. We need to talk. Now. I stared at it. Then another message came. Is it true? I didn't answer. Not right away. Instead, I opened my car door, stepped out, and walked back into the building. Because I still had work to finish. Because my life didn't pause for this. Because I didn't need to react the way she expected me to. When I got home that evening, they were already there. Hannah and Mark. Standing outside my apartment door like they had been waiting. Hannah's arms were crossed. Mark stood slightly behind her, his posture stiff, controlled. I stopped a few feet away. You could have called, I said. I did, she replied quickly. You didn't answer. That doesn't mean you show up uninvited. She ignored that. Is it true? She asked. Straight to it. No build-up. No pretending. I held her gaze. Yes. The word landed. You could see it in the way her shoulders tightened, in the way her jaw clenched just slightly. Mark shifted beside her. How much? He asked. Hannah shot him a look, but she didn't correct him. That told me everything. I looked at both of them. Then I said, calmly, enough. Hannah exhaled sharply. This is unbelievable, she said. Mom leaves us with a house that has a mortgage we didn't even know about, and you, she stopped, pressing her lips together, trying to regain control, you walk away with this? I didn't respond immediately. Because there it was. Not grief. Not confusion. Comparison. It's not from Mom, I said. It doesn't matter where it's from, she snapped. It changes everything. I tilted my head slightly. For you, I said. That hit. She took a step forward. We're still family, she said. I almost smiled. Because the timing of that sentence was perfect. Are we? I asked. She hesitated. Just for a second. But it was enough. You said I wasn't, I continued. At the reading. At the funeral. At every point where it mattered. That was different, she said quickly. Was it? I asked. Her expression tightened. You don't get to rewrite that now, I said. Mark stepped in then, his tone smoother, more calculated. Look, he said, no one's trying to rewrite anything. We're just saying, this changes the situation. I nodded slowly. It does, I said. Hannah's eyes searched my face. So, what are you going to do? She asked. I thought about it. About the test. About the meeting on Saturday. About the photograph on Lawson's wall. About the sentence in that envelope. I'm going to meet her, I said. Her? Hannah asked. My sister. The word hung there. New. Unfamiliar. Real. Hannah's expression shifted again. Not anger. Not frustration. Something else. Something closer to fear. And for the first time, I realized she understood. Not the full picture. But enough of it. Enough to know. This wasn't something she could control anymore. Saturday came with clear skies and a kind of quiet that felt deliberate, like the day itself understood it wasn't supposed to rush. I left early. Not because I was nervous, but because I didn't want to arrive feeling like I was catching up to something. I wanted to arrive like I belonged there, even if I didn't fully believe that yet. The Carter estate sat just outside the city, past a long stretch of road lined with old oak trees that arched slightly overhead, their branches filtering the sunlight into something softer. The driveway curved inward, gravel crunching under my tires as the house came into view. It wasn't extravagant. It wasn't designed to impress. It was established. A two-story home with a wide porch, white columns, and the kind of quiet presence that didn't need to prove anything. I parked and sat there for a moment, my hands resting on the steering wheel. This was it. Not the end of something. The beginning of something I hadn't planned for. I stepped out of the car. Before I reached the steps, the front door opened. A woman stood there. Mid-60s, silver-streaked hair pulled back loosely, posture steady, eyes that immediately found mine without hesitation. She didn't need to ask who I was. I would have known you anywhere, she said. Her voice was warm. Certain. I stopped at the bottom of the steps. You look like him, she added. There it was again. That connection. Not forced. Not questioned. Seen. I'm Emily, she said. I know, I replied. For a second, neither of us moved. Then she stepped forward, closing the distance, and took my hands in hers. Her grip was firm. Grounding. I've been waiting a long time for this, she said softly. Something in my chest shifted. Not painfully. Not sharply. Just opening. I didn't know, I said. I know, she replied. That's not on you. She didn't hesitate. She didn't ask for explanations. She didn't question anything. She just accepted what was in front of her. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I had to prove I belonged. She led me inside. The house was warm in a way my childhood home never had been. Not just in temperature, but in presence. There were photos on the walls, real ones. Not curated. Not staged. Just moments. Life. We walked down a hallway into a study at the back of the house. Dark wood shelves. A desk near the window. Papers neatly stacked, like someone had just stepped away. And on that desk, a photograph. I stopped. It was me. 5 years old. Gap-toothed smile. Hair pulled back unevenly. Eyes bright in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. I walked closer without thinking. He kept it there, Emily said quietly. For years. I picked it up. My hands didn't shake. But something deeper did. Where did he get it? I asked. We never knew, she said. It just appeared one day. He didn't explain. He just said, that's her. Her. Not a possibility. Not a question. A certainty. He tried, Emily continued. More than once. More than most people would have. But your mother, she paused, not finishing the sentence, but she didn't need to. I understand, I said. And I did. Not in a way that excused anything. But in a way that explained it. Emily stepped closer, her voice softer now. He talked about you, she said. Not often, but enough that I knew you mattered. That word again. Mattered. I set the photograph back down carefully. I didn't know him, I said. I know, she replied. But he knew you existed. And that mattered to him. We stood there for a moment, the quiet between us not uncomfortable, not forced. Just shared. Later, we sat on the back porch. She poured tea. We talked. Not about everything. Not all at once. But enough. About him. About his routines. The way he worked. The way he laughed. The things he regretted. He used to say, Emily added at one point, that the hardest part wasn't not finding you, it was not knowing if you knew he was looking. I looked out at the land stretching beyond the house. Fields. Open space. Something steady. He was, she said gently. He really was. I nodded. Because now. I believed it. The legal part came the following week. Papers. Signatures. Transfers. The process was straightforward, clean, efficient. 35 acres of land. An investment account. The guest house. Numbers on paper. Assets transferred. But none of that felt like the point. Because what I gained wasn't just something I could measure. Hannah called 2 days after everything was finalized. I let it ring once. Twice. Then I answered. Her voice was different. Quieter. Careful. I heard it's official, she said. It is. A pause. I've been thinking, she continued. We're still sisters. That doesn't change. I leaned against the kitchen counter, the same place I had stood weeks ago when everything started. What do you need, Hannah? I asked. She didn't answer immediately. Then. The house has a second mortgage, she said. Mom never told us. It's more than we expected. There it was. Not an apology. Not recognition. Need. I was wondering if maybe you could help. No, I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't hesitate. I just said it. She inhaled sharply. You didn't even let me finish. I didn't need to, I replied. Silence. Long enough that I thought she might hang up. I said things I didn't mean, she said finally. You meant them when you said them, I replied. That was before. Before what? I asked. Before it mattered to you? She didn't answer. Because again. She couldn't. I'm not your solution, I said. I'm not your backup plan. And I'm not your responsibility anymore. Her voice dropped. I'm sorry. And for a second? It sounded real. But timing matters. Context matters. I know, I said. And I meant it. She was sorry. Just not for the reasons that would have changed anything. I ended the call. Set the phone down. And felt. Nothing. No guilt. No pull to fix it. No instinct to make it easier. That part of me was gone. 6 months later, I moved into the guest house. It was small. Simple. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, a porch that caught the morning light just right. It didn't feel temporary. It felt placed. Like it had been waiting. Emily helped me move in. We didn't rush. We didn't make it into anything dramatic. We just carried boxes, set things down, adjusted as we went. Dad built this for someone, she said at one point, looking around. We always wondered who. I smiled slightly. I think we know now. Life didn't stop. I still worked. Still woke up early. Still balanced accounts and met deadlines. But something had changed in a way that didn't need constant attention. It just existed. Steady. Certain. Kyle texted occasionally. Nothing heavy. Nothing demanding. Just small things. Updates. A door left open, finally being used. Hannah didn't call again. And I didn't expect her to. One evening, I sat on the porch with a notebook in my lap. The air was warm. Quiet. I picked up a pen and wrote. Mom. You left me one sentence. You meant it to take something from me. To show me I didn't belong. You were right about one thing. I didn't belong where you tried to keep me. But you were wrong about everything else. Because that sentence didn't take anything. It gave me something. The truth. And the truth led me here. To a place you never intended me to find. To a life you couldn't control. I don't hate you. I don't forgive you. I just don't carry you anymore. I folded the paper. Didn't seal it. Didn't send it. Just placed it in the drawer beside my bed. Next to the envelope. 2 pieces of paper. One meant to break me. One written after I realized it couldn't. Now, before you go, if this story stayed with you, if any part of it felt familiar, or hit somewhere you didn't expect, subscribe to Women Reddit Stories and drop a comment telling me the moment that affected you the most. I read every single one, and I'd really like to hear yours. I'm Lila Monroe. I'm 32 years old. And for the first time in my life, I know exactly where I stand.